Bonjour!
Bonjour everyone, Pantoufleee here today for a new video in which we're gonna discuss about tier 10 light tanks and pretty much all of them. I receive plenties of DMs every day of people asking me, hey Pantoufleee, I don't know which light tank should I get? Should I get the Batchat, the Vickers, or the Sheridan? As we only have 3 tier 10 light tanks in the game at the moment, I thought I could do an overall review of all those 3 tanks, talking a little bit about the playstyle while watching a replay, so you understand which one will fit you the most. Let me explain to you briefly, starting with the Batchat 25 tons. This is, in my opinion, out of all the light tanks, the hardest to master, simply because with its auto-loading mechanism, when you are reloading, you are quite exposed to your opponents. Of course, this tank has several strengths, such as its speed, its traverse speed, and in my opinion, the Batchat nowadays, especially since the buff it received in the 7.5 update, is one of the greatest light tanks. In my opinion, if I had to do a top, I would go for top 1 Vickers, top 2 Batchat, top 3 Sheridan. But don't worry, we're going to talk about all those tanks later on. The main thing and difference that makes the Batchat, in my opinion, better in terms of armor when you compare it to the Sheridan or even the Vickers Light is probably the fact that its upper plate at the front of the hull is extremely armored. And with such kind of strength, you can bounce shots you wouldn't expect. For example, the shot I took from the T92E1 at the beginning of the battle. And trust me, with the Batchat, it's commonly known for you that you will be able to bounce shots even coming from the highest penetrating tanks, such as the Ori, the Grill, pretty much all tank destroyer at tier 10. But what I find lovely about this tank is that, unlike a Sheridan or a Vickers Light, thanks to its auto-loading mechanism, you will be able to scare your opponents. Because I want to remind you that with 3 shells of 310 alpha damage each, you have a total of 930 alpha for your total burst. And trust me, this is going to persuade a lot of your opponents not to fuck with you. Now, there are several things that makes this tank hard to play. The reload time. The whole reload time is around 14 seconds. You're gonna tell me, no, it's not that much if we compare it to the Sheridan. Yeah, I agree. But the main difference between the Sheridan and this tank is that this one doesn't need only 14 seconds to release its shells. As you have 3 shells in the magazine, you will take around 5 seconds more to unleash your whole clip. Whereas a Sheridan reloads for 14 seconds, bursts its shot, and after comes back to a reload for its 530 alpha damage. Therefore, when you are playing with the Batchat, you want to be extremely careful. You can play it alone like I did on my game right there. As long as you run around, as long as you don't really stop, don't worry, you have the accuracy to be able to do that. And as you can see, it worked pretty effectively in this game, sorry. Simply because if you take a closer look at what I'm doing, I nearly never stopped. All I did was running around the targets, right-clicking them. Of course, it's easier on PC, right-clicking and bursting my shots. I don't really care if only 2 shots out of 3 are going in. It's not like you were playing with a 50B or something like that, simply because with this tank, your reload time, your whole reload is quite fast compared to other auto-loaders. Now, should you go for the Batchat? If you are experienced, I think it's the best option. And trust me, I changed my mind because back in the days, I really hated that tank. But nowadays, and especially after that battle, I realized, yeah, the Batchat is competitive and wargaming buffs was actually a really good way to make it a good tank once again. So the Batchat is for pro players that kind of like to play with auto-loading mechanisms as long as you're playing on PC. Trust me, the PC part is extremely important for the Batchat, simply with the fact that if you want to right-click, you need a PC because it makes it way easier. Let's continue the list while talking and seeing a live replay of the Sheridan, the tier 10 American light tank. This is the most fun out of all the light tanks, and I think we can all agree on that. One major thing the 7.5 update did, the removal of missiles. Nowadays, when you're playing with the Sheridan, there is no way for you to hide in the back and just shoot rockets without enemies being able to spot you. Because if it was still the case, I would tell you that the Sheridan is actually the best light tank in the game at the moment. But nowadays, it's still a great tank, don't mind me. But the main difference between this one and Sheridan and Batchat or even the Vickers is that with this one, you don't have the accuracy that allows you to burst a lot of shots without aiming. I know it's commonly known that most of your shots will go in with the Sheridan, and I gotta agree for most of them, but trust me, when you have 14 seconds of reload for only one shot and you fucked up that shot, you are gonna be pissed. Now, for the good side of the Sheridan, now that it's carrying heat shells, I think it has one of the best penetration with gold shell if you use calibrated shell among all the light tanks, which makes it quite a good tank to play. Back in the days, the real struggle was when you couldn't use your rockets and you had to deal with your traditional penetration, but sometimes when you're getting face hugged by, I don't know, a mouse or something like that, it would be a real struggle for you to be able to burst your shells in. Nowadays, with heat shell, let's say that the problem is less of a problem than it was before. Now, is it a good tank? Yes, it's still a great tank, and it's suitable, in my opinion, for every single player. Out of the list I'm gonna do here, this is the newbie-friendly one. If you wanna have fun while being pardoned for some of your mistakes, the Sheridan is for you, because I wanna remind you that this tank is filled with spaced armor, which will allow you incredible bounces you wouldn't expect from such a beast. Now, what are the downsides of the Sheridan? First thing first, we already talked about it, but the fact that this tank doesn't have a good reload time, but also you are quite exposed. With the Sheridan, you don't want to play alone on one side. You don't have the DPM allowing you to do that, unlike a Batchat. Not even a Batchat, because with the auto-loading mechanism, you can still don't play alone. But with tanks like Vickers Light, for example, which is the most versatile of this list that we're going to talk about further after, the Sheridan is not made to be alone on the battlefield. If you go on one side and you are really far away from your targets, then yes, you can play it alone, because when enemies will push you, you will have time to check your map, see that they push you, and literally come back to a safe position with your team. But if you want to play it aggressively alone on one side, no, don't take the Sheridan. Pretty much don't take any light tanks if you want to push one side completely alone, because you never know what you can expect from the enemy team. Maybe they are all gonna lemming train you and you're gonna get completely crushed. But overall, if I had to choose one tank to advise newbies to play, to learn how to play light tank, I would go for the Sheridan. Now, one last thing, as you're carrying heat shells with the Sheridan, never shoot at spaced armor. Most of the time, heat shell will stop at the first plate of armor they encounter, and if it's spaced armor, it means you are gonna bounce. But overall, quite a nice tank, even after the nerf. I just think it's a shame that Wargaming did not nerf only the missiles, which was a good thing, don't mind me, but they also nerfed the gun accuracy, if I remember correctly. I might say bullshits right now, because I didn't check before preparing that video, but I'm pretty sure they did, or at least I feel like they did, because it's not as easy as it was back in the days for you to penetrate your shots. Now, let's talk about the last one of the list, the British Tier 10 light tank, aka the Vickers Light. To me, before the 7.5 update, that was a great tank. It was used in tournaments. Most of the clans that wanted to use a light tank would go for the Vickers or the Sheridan because of the missiles, but for clans that did not master the art of missiles, they would go for the Vickers Light. There are several reasons that made this tank great back in the days. First, it's 10 degrees of gun depression, which allows you to be extremely versatile on the battlefield. Therefore, no matter the map you are on, you will always find the right place for you to be effective. Now, one thing that makes this tank a little bit different than the Sheridan and the Batchat. This one feels actually more like a medium that is lightly armored than a traditional light. Let me explain to you why. Unlike the Sheridan and your Batchat, with this one you actually have a fast reload. Not the best, of course, because you have 310 alpha damage for around 7.1 second of reload, or maybe it's 350. Man, I should check before starting those videos. I'm sorry, I don't even remember. But with 7.1 seconds of reload, it might be 350. I hope it is 350. But the turret of this tank. The turret was something back in the days, because after the 7.5 update, Wargaming decided it would be a good idea for them to actually nerf the gun mantlet of this thing. Because I can kind of understand why they did that. I do not support that nerf, but I kind of understand it, simply because with this light tank, when you took a shot straight into your gun mantlet, one chance out of two that it would be a bounce, regardless of what shot you, even if it was a tank destroyer or something like this. And it's not the role Wargaming wants to provide to light tanks. Light tanks are supposed to be tanks that are not here to do anything else besides spotting or maybe trying to sneak some shots from the distance or circling, but definitely not handling shots. And I think that's why Wargaming went for a nerf on the gun mantlet. Nowadays, for those of you owning the Vickers, don't try to bounce things in your gun mantlet. You can still do it, but trust me, it's going to be quite hard for you to bounce all of them, or at least it's harder than it was in the 7.4 update. Now, why would you go for this tank, unlike the Sheridan or the Batchat? Here, it's just because if you really want to learn the playstyle of light tanks overall, the Vickers is the tank for you. You have a really reliable gun, you also have quite a good armor profile for a medium even after the nerf, for a light tank after the nerf, sorry. But most importantly, your tank is quite mobile, and when you have such kind of mobility, you can allow yourself to relocate quite easily. Now, the only thing we are waiting for right now is probably for Wargaming to implement a tier 10 Russian or a tier 10 German light tank. That would be awesome. So we're gonna wait to see what Wargaming does with those light tanks. But I'm pretty sure we're gonna see pretty soon the I forgot the name in World of Tank PC, but we have the two of them. I think the Russian is called LT100T. Or something like this, and for the Germans, I think it's Sparpanzer or something like this. And I'm really looking forward for Wargaming to implement those tanks, as long as Wargaming prevents a lot of light tanks being in the same match. I think the main problem nowadays with light tanks, if we implement too much of them, is that we're gonna face, let's say, 5 light tanks in each teams, and that's gonna fuck up a little bit the matchmaking. But I'm pretty sure Wargaming is gonna do the job when it comes to this. So overall, why would you want to play the Vickers? Because it's the best for you to understand all the mechanisms that go around mediums and light playstyle. And yes, I insist on the medium part because you can play this tank like a medium as long as you play it carefully. Anyway, I died like a bot. I was not expecting the Grill 15 to be here. I hope this video will highlight to you what preferences you should go for when it comes to Sheridan, Vickers Light and Batchat. If that's the case, you know what to do. Feel free to subscribe, like and share, and I'm gonna see you soon for a new video. Au revoir.